Okay, welcome to another episode of Wild Podcast. I got that right this time, and this would have been the episode to really get that wrong. Today we are talking about our titular film, Wild Planet, and I am here with my fellow helium head, Rod Barnett.
I have often been called many things. Helium head, never before, but it's appropriate.
It's great, isn't it? They say it at least twice, I think, in this film.
Yes.
You helium head. I enjoyed that so much I wrote it down.
Oh well, when Tony Russell spews that out for the first time, it's said with such anger. He's so pissed. It's almost enough to make you not laugh at the line.
Yeah. I like it when sci-fi futuristic stuff, they kind of try and make up insults that might be real in the future. I mean, it's a bit like in Red Dwarf where they keep calling each other smegheads.
Yes, but that one was a comedy, so in a way, the stuff in Red Dwarf kind of works because the point is to make you laugh. So yeah,
and also it did become a real insult, and people did start using it. So
I know I did. Yeah,
not sure if helium head really took off. But maybe we can make a start here and trying to bring it back.
Oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. A helium head, the new insult for the 21st century.
Yeah. So how are you doing anyway? You must be up to all kinds of good film stuff these days, as usual.
Kind of eyeball deep. I've been remiss in recording any podcasts of my own, and now, at least in June, there were a couple of flubbed opportunities, and now I'm scheduled up for several podcasts that are going to get recorded in this in July, and August is looking kind of weird. And then, man, it's just there are lots of different things, and I'm waiting to hear back on some commentary track stuff that I'm going to be doing later in the year, and it's just all kinds of projects that. Some of them are scheduled and you know what's going to happen, and some of them are still in the, as soon as you hear from us, then we'll need it kind of situation.
Right. And you also, I think just at the time of recording, I think it was last week, you were a guest on another podcast talking about the Polizioteschi films.
Yeah.
Which was very enjoyable. And I thought that was interesting. I think you recorded that before I invited you to come onto this podcast, and we are planning to do a whole Polizioteschi season soon. But I thought what you did there was a great kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? A good
appetizer.
Yes, that's the word. Thank you. A good appetizer for what's coming up.
Well, that was a fun thing. That's the Then Is Now podcast. And I do recommend going over and checking that podcast out. Some of the guests that fella has gotten onto his show, man, that's impressive. But he and I, and he's very upfront about this, but he's not as upfront with one detail about the recording of that show. We recorded it months ago, and I messed up. I recorded my end of the conversation very poorly, and so it took him months to figure out a way to get my audio into some form of shape that it would be audible and discernible. And so I was fully aware that he might never be able to actually put it out because I screwed it up. It's all my fault. Nothing to do with the purveyor of that particular show. That was my mistake, and luckily I learned from that mistake. And we'll never make that error again. But it's just so weird. I've been doing this crap for 12 years, and I still occasionally will find a way to sabotage myself.
Oh, well, at least now this is why this sounds so great.
It sounds superb.
Yeah. But no, it was your discussion there was very interesting. I think I did tweet it on the Wild podcast Twitter feed. If anybody wants to find that and listen to that, it's very interesting. And yeah, the film that you picked is one of my favorites. Anyway, Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man. Mm-hmm. So what I think I'll do when we get to our Polizioteschi season, we'll just skip over that one because you've covered it already, and we'll just tweet that out again, and we'll go straight to some of the other films. But that is a truly great movie for anybody, not just Italian genre fans. It's just a really entertaining film.
I did have to give a hat tip to a Facebook friend Jeff Clark for describing that movie as Starsky and Hutch if they were sociopaths.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked the your, I've forgotten his name, the host of the show. He said that it was like Starsky and Hutch, like a pre-code Starsky and Hutch. Or,
Yes.
if there were no broadcasting rules, Starsky and Hutch. Yeah,
and murder was on the agenda all the time. Yeah.
In the UK, for UK viewers, I would say rather than Starsky and Hutch, the parallel is with something like The Professionals or The Sweeney. We had a couple of for British television, very violent cop shows in the 70s.
Yeah.
That were running around London, lots of gangsters and car chases, but because they were quite low budget, they weren't really fancy cars. They were just little crappy Alfa Romeos and stuff like that. So it's I think they're quite close to some of the lower budget Polizioteschi films, those British shows as well. But anyway, we're way off topic for today, but I just thought I wanted to mention that so people can go and check that out. And it's a good sort of foreshadowing of what we've got coming up. But I'm not trying to think if there's any other interesting Italian genre stuff. I guess since we last recorded, Severin had their big sale. Yeah. And I think we talked last time about the post-apocalyptic films that they had coming out, and also since then the book that was accompanying that sale is out. I got my copy last week, I think, which is really good, called After the World Ends, because I backed it on Kickstarter. So it was on Kickstarter before I knew about it, before Severin announced it as well. So that's a French book translated into English, and you can tell that it's been translated into English from another language. But I think, given the fact that most of these films are European and very often dubbed into a second language, or at least the subtitles are, it's sort of fitting, I think, with the genre that the language isn't always exactly how you would have phrased something. It's quite fun to read that. But yeah, so I got the book, and I got the End Game soundtrack on CD, and I've also got it coming on vinyl, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
But also Severin, I think it was after we recorded, they announced that they were doing the Blood for Dracula 4K restoration. So that's pretty big Italian genre news, because that and then its co-feature Flesh for Frankenstein, which has been announced as coming out from Vinegar Syndrome. So these two genre films that have been top of a lot of people's lists for decades are finally getting really good, legitimate releases, because they've been very hard to see for a long time.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, those two films have an Antonio Margheriti connection that is still talked about and debated to this day. So,
yes, highly contested.
Yes,
which is I don't think we'll ever truly get to the bottom of that. But what I am looking forward to, at least on the extras that they've announced for Blood for Dracula, they have got an interview with Paul Morrissey. So it'll be interesting whether he gets asked about that, to see if he has anything to say. But given how much he dismisses Andy Warhol's involvement and claims it's all his own work, I imagine that he would also dismiss the suggestion that anyone else helped out. So
I would bet money on that supposition. Yes.
So I imagine we'll never truly know just how much Margheriti was involved. But anyway, I am really looking forward to getting my copy of that when it finally arrives. I haven't seen that film since I was about 17. So yeah, my main memories of that film are the rude bits. I think because I was only 17, that's the bit I really remember most. Rather than any of the horror bits or the plot, or the fact that Vittorio De Sica is in it, which I'd completely forgotten about. But I do remember Joe D'Alessandro having to take everybody's virginity before Dracula gets to them or something.
Yes, indeed.
So something to look forward to there. But very excited that we've got to this week. We've been working our way through the history of Italians in space, and we get to, it's not necessarily the best film, but certainly one of my favorites in this particular genre, Wild Wild Planet, as it was released in America. Otherwise, well, I should say that's the name that it's most known by through its American release. The Italian title is I criminali della galassia, which is basically the criminals from space, I think.
Or criminals of the galaxy.
Or sorry, yeah, not space. See, I'm looking at it right in front of me, and I still got that wrong. Criminals from the galaxy. You're right. I've even got this. I've got a poster on my wall downstairs, an original Italian poster with the Italian title on, and then I still messed it up.
Well, that's amazing. That makes us the perfect people to talk about this, because I have the American poster on my wall frame.
Oh, nice. Well,
yeah.
let's try and tweet both of those out.
I'll be glad to. Yeah, it's
really cool.
it's hanging in the stairwell in my house here. It's one of my prized bits of movie poster artwork. I think it's astonishing.
That is very cool. So, who was it that put that out? Was it MGM?
Yes, it was MGM. Yes,
in America. That's very cool. Yeah. So this. Now I know you know a lot more about these movies than me, and you've done podcasts on. Have you podcasted about this one? I know you've covered some of the other.
Yeah, I've actually podcasted about this one.
Right.
I did it. I covered it several years ago with Derek Cook over on Monster Kid Radio.
Yeah,
and
that was it.
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't do it on Bloody Pit, did you?
No. Mainly because because I'd already done the one on that particular one. We did a couple of the others. You know, there are 4 in this run, and I think the only one that I haven't podcasted about so far is Snow Devils, and I will eventually get to that one, probably with you.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, the reason I consider with let me just take a step back. So, this film is known as it's one of the Gamma 1 quadrilogy. Mm-hmm. So Margheriti made 4 films back to back, apparently with a budget of around $30,000 per film. He shot each film in about. Now I did read this, and I'm trying to find how long it was. It's about 2 or 3 weeks per movie.
Yeah,
they've got similar characters. A lot of the same actors pop in and out. Sets, costumes, and so on. Although some of the character names do change, so they're not necessarily all part of the same story, but they kind of are. They're all based around. They're all somehow connected to the Gamma 1 space station. Although we only see that for about 5 minutes in this film, and then they go somewhere else. And Snow Devils, which is one of the other films, is set primarily in the Himalayas, and it's about the guys going to look for the Yeti, and the Yeti is an alien, if I remember rightly. It's been a while since I've watched that one. So you've got these 4 movies, and the plan was, and it sort of varies depending on what you read, but there was a deal with MGM. They were going to make these films for Italian television, but then the cinema rights were picked up for it to be shown in cinemas in America. So I think in Italy, they were also. This is where I get confused, because there are cinema posters. As I mentioned, I've got one. So I think it did get seen in cinemas in Italy as well as. So that's what made me think maybe it was for American television. But then you look at the American release, and it got cinema releases in America as well. So you've got a poster for that.
Yeah.
So it seems to have got cinematic releases despite originally being made for television, and maybe it did get shown on television as well.
Well, see, there's
I'm
a lot
slightly
of
confused.
Yeah, exactly. The confusing part of this is that there's so many different. I mean, there are conflicting bits of information trying to determine the original intent for producing the movies in the first place. Mm-hmm. A lot of the budget and the length of time and when it was done and why there are of the 4 there are 2 that star in the leads, a pair of actors, and then in the other 2 films they switch characters and switch actors. It's because 2 were made back to back, and then there was a slight pause, and then they brought in and then there were the other 2 that were made, and so essentially it's as if Gamma 1 got got new commanding officers essentially, and the all of these details you can find and are fairly agreed upon. But the whole idea of the one thing that seems to be a constant hang up is were they originally thought to be produced for television and then taken to cinemas, or was there an idea that it would go to television in one country but cinemas in another country? That's where it gets really iffy and weird. But yeah, I mean, there is, they did get released to cinemas in Italy and in America, and I think in Britain too, although I don't know if there's any proof of that.
No, well, Wild, so in terms of cinema releases, yes, Wild Wild Planet did get a UK release.
Okay,
but
good.
not until 1967. Whereas I think it came out elsewhere in 1966.
Right.
So it took a little bit longer to come out. And it was rated X, can you believe? I mean,
Really?
It's basically a film for kids. Yeah, it got. I don't know why. I don't have the details for that. But
Was it the creepy room of freaks, or the four-armed guy, or what?
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? I'm assuming there's also, if you think about the beginning of the movie, we'll go through a plot summary in a moment, but we see quite close to the beginning a whole load of human organs. There's brains, there's eyeballs, there's lungs, and it's quite graphic for what is ostensibly you'd think is a kids movie. And then you've got this room full of horribly deformed people for some reason.
Well, see, that's just it. This is, I mean, it would be easy to argue that these films, especially this one, is essentially kind of a jumped up 60s version of a Buck Rogers serial, kind of all crammed into 90 minutes. But there are elements within it that just scream, "Oh, we're in Italy," and that would be the lungs that are on a table breathing, on their own, and miniaturized organs laid out with tubes leading to them in a room full of apparently just medical mistakes that this doctor keeps around just to remind himself that he can make mistakes. It's
I'm just going to keep this room full of people who are all medical freaks.
It's insane, and I love the well, another thing that could be adding to one country or another deciding that the material within it is something that needs to be only viewed by adults is the over the top reactions of our dear lead character Mike Halstead, played by Tony Russell. Anytime he encounters something that isn't standard, normal, human shaped in any way, shape, or form, he acts as if someone just farted or something. He acts as if there's some horrendous smell emanating from whatever he's looking at, and it's just this hideous thing. Oh my God. And I'm thinking to myself, it's a guy with 4 arms. I'm more fascinated than appalled, man. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a couple of moments like that. There's another one when they discover shrunken people in a suitcase.
Yeah.
And the guy just it's like he has some kind of breakdown and starts screaming, "It's horrible, it's terrible." Ah.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Get him out of here." And I'm like, well, it's just kind of cool. I don't know about horrifying.
I would not be repulsed. I would be leaning toward it, trying to see, is this real? Is this a real thing? Or is this something,
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But we should probably go back to the beginning. So we mentioned, there are 4 films in this quadrilogy. So the first one, in terms of their release dates, again, it's difficult to know the order they're supposed to be in because they don't really follow each other. But according to Matt Blake in the book Science Fiction Italian Style, the release dates were that War of the Planets came out first, then Wild Wild Planet, then War Between the Planets, and then the very odd Snow Devils, which doesn't really fit with them very much at all. I read somewhere, and I've never been able to find where I read this, that they were filming, and this might just be made up by somebody, and that's why I can't find it again, that they were filming these together rather than shooting one, then shooting the other one, and back to back, that they were shooting scenes for one, then scenes for the other one, and that they were color coding the clapperboards so that they knew which shots were for which of the 4 movies.
Yeah.
I read that somewhere, but I don't know if that's true. because I've looked and looked and looked and I can't find where I read it.
Like I say, I think that that's probably true, but I think that it was more likely that they were shooting two of them at a time, that they paired them up.
Yeah.
And that would explain, like I say, to go along with the changes in the cast. And that would make it something, much more easy to handle rather than trying to do 4 different scripts at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is so it's Antonio Margheriti again doing what he does best. We've seen we've covered one of his films a couple of episodes ago, which was Mission. What was it called now?
Oh, Operation. I'm sorry. Assignment Outer Space.
How did that say? I knew it was Mission Assignment Operation. It had a Euro spy feel to it, and so that was. So he made that film in 1960, and then he's done a few peplum films. He's done a few Gothic horror films, and now he's back to. I mean, War of the whole Gamma 1 quadrilogy are probably some of his most well-known films, and Wild Wild Planet is probably the most well-known of the 4. I wanted to mention again that somebody who worked on these films with Margheriti was Ruggero Deodato, which brings us back to the discussion we just had about Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man.
Yeah.
So Deodato, I don't think he's credited, but he was working with Margheriti. Margheriti was a great friend of his and really helped him out at the beginning of his career, and so he worked with him on several films. You and I, 4 years ago now, I think, talked about Hercules, Prisoner of Evil, which is
right.
a Margheriti peplum film that Deodato actually directed. And I was lucky enough to interview Deodato about 10 years ago, and it was very cool. And I talked to him about his work on those early films, and he said what a great friend Margheriti was, and when he started making his own movies, if he was stuck on something, you would call Margheriti and he'd give him advice. And so I did ask him about Wild Wild Planet, and our interview was very short and being translated back and forth because he doesn't speak English very much. So the gist of it was that he was there and he helped out with the shooting of the miniatures stuff, if I remember right. He had quite fond memories of it. And what also is another good connection there is that this film features a very young and extremely well cheekboned Franco Nero as Jake.
Yes.
And of course, Franco Nero was also in Django around this time, which Deodato also worked on. So it's all these things seem to connect, which is nice. But yeah, it's I'd forgotten Franco Nero was in this. I think the first time I watched it, I didn't recognize him, and this time I was like, "Oh, there's Franco Nero."
Oh well, each time that I've forced my poor dear sweet Beth to watch this movie with me, which happened, of course, again a couple of nights ago.
Yes.
She's game for this stuff, but as soon as she realized Franco Nero was in it, she's like, oh, she's completely on board.
Yeah, he's in it more than I remembered that he was. He's actually he was in. He gets to do several fun things. He gets to get beaten up by Lieutenant Connie Gomez when she's demonstrating her karate skills, and he gets to shoot a flamethrower.
Yeah,
they've got these laser guns, which are basically just pocket flamethrowers, they're pocket welding blowtorches or something. It's pretty funny.
As ray guns go, they're pretty effective for what they need to be. Yeah,
exactly. This beats this is not your typical blaster. This is a pocket blowtorch, which looks really dangerous because the actors really are shooting quite hot flame out the end of these guns. And there's at least one shot where, if you look closely, you can see the gas cable coming out of the end of the gun down into their pocket, and then presumably off to some gas canister just behind them, feeding the flames there, which I thought was quite fun.
Don't break the illusion, Adrian. Don't break the illusion.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we talk about the plot? Let's get to the story.
This is one thing before we launch into the plot. I have to admit that one of my favorite things about this is the movie poster art, and I have to say that the things that are listed on the American version This movie does not skimp. Everything that it promises is going to be in the movie is in the movie, and these are the 6 things that it lays out. It says the laser ray girls, four-armed strangler, menacing mutants, the deadly doll men, flesh fusion experiments, and armada of spaceships. Now, I saved that one for last because I don't know about armada. I don't know how many ships would constitute an actual armada. So maybe they don't quite make that one. But the other 5, they're in the movie, people.
We can. I mean, we could go through that list. I mean, laser ray girls. There are definitely girls in the film. Although, if you look at the poster, the poster is brilliant. It's got these girls in silver bikinis and thigh high, knee high purple leather boots, holding these machine gun type ray guns. We don't see that in the movie, unfortunately. There are girls, but then not silver bikinis with machine guns. I mean, I don't even remember seeing any of the girls holding guns at all. So there are girls, but the laser bit is perhaps a bit of an exaggeration. The four-armed strangler, there's actually several of those. So the poster promises 1, and we get more than 1. There are the menacing mutants. I don't know about menacing. They're more just kind of sad. They're just sad mutants. The deadly doll men, that's quite funny because they're pretty much asleep. The doll men. Yeah. There are definitely flesh fusion experiments. We'll give them that one. And the armada of spaceships is perhaps a bit of an exaggeration. I mean, the American poster art is fabulous. I'm very jealous that you've got one of those. The Italian poster art is completely different. But again, slightly exaggerates the truth as well. On the poster, you've got explosions in space, and there's loads of guys with jetpacks firing laser guns in space. One thing that is interesting in the poster is right in the middle, behind the bikini babes, you've got one of the butterfly dancers, which is an odd image until you've seen the movie, and then it makes sense. But yeah, no, no, but yeah, it's one of the best. It's one of the best posters, and I don't have one of those, but that poster art is the wallpaper on my Antonio Margheriti blog, which I can now plug, I suppose. I've got a good excuse. So if you go to bloggeriti.blogspot.com, that's BLOGHERITI, you can see my occasionally updated Antonio Margheriti blog. So I've had Wild Wild Planet as the background art for that the whole time, although I haven't actually written anything about Wild Wild Planet yet on there. So I will get to that eventually. But yeah, that artwork is fab. So what I thought I would do is I'll use our friend Matt Blake here to give us a plot summary of Wild Wild Planet, and then we'll see what we remember or what we want to mention as we go through. Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting, the plot, the title differences. Obviously the Italian one is the criminals from the galaxy, and the American one, Wild Wild Planet, I think much better captures the feel of the film, because they do actually go to a planet where things are pretty wild. Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyway, so
well, right. And I think it's odd considering that it does appear that the reason they titled it that was an attempt to capitalize on the success of Wild Wild West, the television series.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I'd forgotten about Wild Wild West.
Which is, it's such an obvious thing once someone points it out, but it's just really kind of bizarre because it does fit this in that it is it's wild, it's way out.
Yeah. I'm not sure how big a show Wild Wild West was.
Oh, it was huge. I mean, it was on the air for it was a huge ratings hit for about 5 years. Yeah.
I don't know if it ever was picked up in particularly in the UK. I'm not sure whether that title would have meant much to the British audiences. But at least, I mean, it also makes sense to put the name Planet in there because obviously we've had War of the Planets and then Wild Wild Planet, and then we get War Between the Planets. And the trouble with those names, especially War of the Planets and War Between the Planets, is these titles come up in slightly different forms with other films, and it starts to get really confusing.
Yes.
About which films you've seen, and so on, as we will see when we get to our next episode in a couple of weeks. But anyway, so here we go. Let's go for it. Gamma 1. Oh, I'm trying to remember character names. So the space station Gamma 1, which is being run by Commander Mike Halstead, played by Tony Russell, who is he American? He is American, isn't he?
He does seem to be. Yeah, he does seem. Yeah. Do you mean the actor or the character?
Yes. Well, the actor. He was.
Yes, he was an American. Yes.
He went to Italy and just worked in tons of Italian movies, like so many guys did back then.
Yeah, and he ended up in the mid '60s, kind of being one of the founders and president of the English Language Dubbers Association there in Italy. He did a lot. There are a lot of movies where you're hearing his voice that he in, and you're not seeing him.
That makes sense. I wonder if was that with Mel Wells? Was he with that? Because I know he had a company dubbing films in Italy as well around the same time. Perhaps it was. But yeah, actually. So Tony Russell only actually died 4 years ago at the age of 91, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, so he looked old in this film, so that's pretty good going. I think he's just one of those guys, kind of in the 1950s and 60s, men seem to look a lot older than they actually were. Like he was probably only about 35, but he looks like he's pushing 60.
Well, there are some people who just look ancient. It's like this weird thing when you learn that Wilford Brimley, when he made the movie Cocoon, was in his 50s. It's like it looks like he's 106. You know.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. So so we've got him. He's the kind of commander in charge. He's running Gamma 1. He's got a girlfriend up on Gamma 1, which is Connie, played by Lisa Gastoni, who seems to spend most of her time training women how to fling men over their shoulders and
primarily how to fling Franco Nero around.
Yeah, how to throw them on the ground and then step on their throats. That seems to be their main form of self-defense, which is quite fun. So meanwhile, they've got Professor Nermi up there, played by Massimo Serrato. He is part of the intergalactic research conglomerate CBM, which I don't think we ever find out what CBM stands for, but they just refer to it all the time as the corporation.
Wait a minute, I thought we did find out what that.
Oh, did we? Maybe we did.
Yeah, it's something like, gosh darn.
I'm not sure, but it reminded me of Weyland Yutani, the way they keep calling it the corporation. It's like the evil guys in Alien who just don't care who dies as long as they.
I know they immediately code it in such a way that it sounds ominous, and
yeah, the corporation. So you've got the evil corporation there, and Professor Nermi is for some reason he's doing this. He's got to do these scientific experiments in space. He's got artificially created organs, which could be used to cure illness and increase the human lifespan. So this is where we see all these close-ups of brains in jars with eyeballs attached and lungs breathing on their own. And it's quite, I think this is probably why they just slapped an X on it here in the UK, because it's pretty graphic for what is otherwise basically an episode of UFO or Space 1999. But yeah, we've got all this stuff going on. And Commander Halstead is not impressed. He thinks that the humans should just be allowed to be humans.
Whereas, yes, he likes people the way they are now.
Yeah.
And that's one of the funnier things to me. I love the aspect of the commanding officer who's essentially such a conservative mindset that any scientific advance that would impinge upon the human form is simply abhorrent. It's one of those things where it's like, I know that we have to kind of have some kind of conflict, but shouldn't the conflict grow out of something other than, sheer revulsion at the slightest deviation from the human norm? I mean, it's bizarre.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? And what's interesting is, although this is supposed to be, I can't remember what, I'm really doing a very bad job at presenting this. I can't remember when exactly we're supposed to be in the future, or if they actually give a date. But
I keep seeing in different descriptions people giving the date as like 2015. But I don't know that I can't remember if that's said outright within the body
I'm not
of the
sure
film.
if it is. I mean, it certainly appears to be several hundred years into the future, given the kind of technology that they're using. But it's interesting that it's all about transplantation, when obviously in the 60s this was a big deal. The first heart transplant was the year after this film came out, 1967. And there was a lot of discussion at the time, the ethics of transplantation. Like, what if you're putting somebody else, a part of somebody else who died, into you, what does that mean about the soul? And does part of that person's, I mean, this all goes back to things like the Hands of Orlok, if you receive a transplantation for somebody else's body, does that then mean that their personality becomes part of yours? And there are all sorts of stories about people who've had transplants who then start to like the kind of music that they then discover the person whose heart they got was into. And there's all these sort of interesting ethical and spiritual discussions about transplants. So I think this film, that must be on purpose, that they've picked up on that, because this is obviously what was going on, and particularly in a very religious country like Italy, the thought about the soul and your identity and how that connects with things like transplantation, that must have been in their minds when they wrote this, because it's pretty explicit that they bring up this debate right there in the first 5 minutes about the ethics of transplantation, even though in this film they appear to be artificial rather than whipped out of somebody. But it still looks like, the kind of setup that they've got, the bit with the brain and the eyeballs, just reminded me of Reanimator, or like Bride of Reanimator, when he's just slapping bits together and making little things. Like he's got in Reanimator, he's got an eyeball attached to a hand that's running around the house, and then at the end we see his own cupboard of mistakes come to life, and
animated knickknacks.
So it's interesting that this is kind of tying in with that debate. But anyway, so he's got all this stuff growing, and I'm not entirely sure why it needs to be on Gamma 1, but it's because basically the corporation said so. So the commander gives Nermi a tour, and they go to Connie's karate judo lab, whatever they are, where she's throwing Franco Nero around the room, and and Nermi is such a sleaze, like, oh, you have such a perfect body, and I want to get to know it better, and really awful pickup lines. But then he's like, oh no, I'm purely scientific interest, and he's basically spots her body as being the pinnacle of female evolution, and he's got evil intent, but which as we later find out. But she's just kind of flattered by this interest, because I think Commander Halstead is a bit cold towards her, even though they're supposedly going out. So she's like, yeah, sure, because I think she wants to make him jealous. So then we see them dancing. There's some brilliant futuristic music and dancing in the Gamma 1 nightclub.
Yeah, and if anyone has any doubts, by the way, about the, shall we say, the sexual politics of relationships between men and women presented in this film, it's completely the 1950s and 1960s here. It's everything that you would imagine as an attitude from either side of the gender coin is going to be exactly what's on screen. The cliches, the cliches abound. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, and the don't get me wrong. I mean, it's probably a good idea to just surmise from where you're sitting in the mid '60s that these kinds of attitudes are going, or at least these kinds of relationship dynamics are going to continue on into the future. Because, of course, you can look to the past and see that to some degree or another they exist there as well. But it's the presentation of them that just, it's like, yes, the early 60s where men were men and women knew their damned places.
Although at least, as I think I mentioned this before, at least none of the women have to just make the men cups of tea. So
True.
At least we've moved on a little bit from the Terror Beyond Space, or
but Lisa Gastoni's character, she's the only female character in the entire movie that has any real characterization. You have all of the well, we'll get to them later on, but
yes.
she's
I'm not sure.
Huh?
No, I was going to say I'm not sure if those other women are even real women.
Exactly.
Slightly confusing. But yeah, she's a proper character for the first 20 minutes or so, and then she kind of just becomes a victim.
Yeah, she becomes what the plot needs her to be, essentially.
Yeah. But so this beginning bit here, she's trying to make Halstead jealous by dancing with Nermi, and it's pretty funny. And then she happens to mention that she's going on leave. She's going to go back to Earth for a holiday. And Nermi's all like, oh no, you should come to the planet, what is it, Delphos, I think it is. It's really, I can get you a free holiday courtesy of the corporation where there'll be spas and I don't know, knitting clubs, whatever it is you women want to do. He's just like selling it as this perfect holiday for her to go and relax and have a really lovely time in Delphos. And so of course she says, hey, free holiday, I'm totally down with that. And Mike is annoyed, but he starts to have other problems to worry about, so he kind of forgets a little bit about her, because strange things are going on back on Earth. So we leave Gamma 1 and then we don't really go back to it, I don't think. I think that's it.
No, I mean, we
go back later?
Do we go back to Gamma 1? No, I don't think we do.
Not
I
sure.
think a good bit of this movie, more than on the other two that aren't Snow Devils, we spend a lot of time on Earth, and I tend to forget that, because what the images that stick in your mind are of the sometimes good, sometimes passable special effects work and all the stuff that happens on the space station and in space. But we spend a lot of time on Earth, which I think is very well handled, and it adds a lot. It adds a lot to the film, and it kind of opens it up.
The best miniatures stuff in this film is the futuristic Earth city that they go down to, and it's absolutely fabulous. It looks like it's basically the Jetsons. You've got all these you've got these freeways with futuristic cars whizzing along them. There's UFOs, flying saucers, I should say. They're not UFOs. They're just their vehicles. They look like flying saucers flying around these massive buildings, and the miniature work is so great, and it's like a futuristic train set is what it looks like they've built. It's brilliant. So when they go to Earth, we get these brilliant sequences of the miniatures. So anyway, back on Earth, people are going missing. Quite a lot of people are just disappearing, and they tend to all be either eminent scientists, child geniuses, military people, beautiful women. They're all just vanishing, and nobody really has a clue. There are no witnesses, nothing. So Halstead gets sent to go and
kind of lead the team. Lead the team that is investigating this.
So he basically becomes a police squad of some kind, of detective. I'm not entirely sure why the commander of a space station. I think their jobs are just very interchangeable. So he's this commander of the space station, but now he's leading a detective squad. Yeah,
there's a lot of kind of there's a lot of verbiage between those characters at that conference table, where you have like Halstead's boss essentially saying, "Well, this isn't really our business. When it becomes our business, give us a call." and then someone saying, well, let's assign Halstead, who from his title is, I guess, in the military. So they just said, well, look, we need to let's put him in charge of this investigation.
And I suppose because military people have gone missing, then there's a kind of crossover there. But so he's starting to look into it. He's very happy to accept this because he wants to get away from the bad atmosphere on Gamma 1, basically meaning because he hates Professor Nermi and he's annoyed that Nermi is making moves on his woman.
Exactly.
So he's great. He's going to stay on Earth and do some investigation. But then we get this sequence. So we get to see some of the things I really love about this film are the cars. We get to see them driving around in these fabulous bubble cars. That are really cool. But what they look like, if you were really inside one of those on a sunny day, you would fry.
Yes, because there's no cover at all. Yeah.
No, it's just a big plexiglass dome over you. But they look really cool, and they're proper cars. They're driving them around.
Mm-hmm.
They are really fun, those things. So, but we see, I think we see a couple of clues as to what's going on when there are these guys they're all identical. They're bald. They're wearing sunglasses. They've got leather trench coats on, and they're carrying a suitcase, and they're walking around with a beautiful woman. And they go up to somebody, and then he kind of puts his coat around them, and then they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just see them close the suitcase and walk off. So we've seen that happen a couple of times already at this point. So we know that must be how people are being made to, people are being kidnapped. But then we see one of these things go wrong, where there's there's a scientist, and they start doing it to him, but then they see a girl who shouts "grandfather." I think.
Yeah, they get interrupted during the process.
So they run off and they just leave, and the woman that's with this guy with the sunglasses says, "You failed," and she does something to him, and he just disappears.
Well, the body disappears and his clothing just collapses on the ground.
And then she jumps into her bubble car and drives off. And then meanwhile, we've got the guy that was Professor Freed, I think he was. He's now a dwarf because he's only been shrunken halfway.
Yes, which is a through line. They carry this character through to the very end of the movie. It's bizarre.
They do. He's in the comedy payoff at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But the woman has also strangled his granddaughter. It looks like she's dead as well, which is a bit shocking. So she strangled the granddaughter and then just
wait a minute. Death of a child. Would death of a child be a reason to give a film an X certificate?
Well, it's possible because again, that's a bit more violence than you would expect.
Yeah.
In a film of this type. So she's dead, and the professor sees this and passes out, and then he ends up in a hospital, and Halstead is brought to see him. And they're all really shocked. They can't work out how he could be half the size that he used to be. But he's in a coma, so they can't actually... Halstead just keeps shouting at him, "Professor! Professor!" No, he's in a coma. "Professor!" He can't hear you. "Professor!" It's not going to work. That's his main interrogation technique.
Yeah, I don't want the film to give the impression that Mr. Halstead or Commander Halstead is mentally inferior, but man, come on.
And then, but they take him out to the corridor, and then they've got another one of these bald guys in sunglasses on a stretcher, and he's dead. I'm not sure. I can't remember where they got him from, but this is where they pull the sheet back, and this is the guy with 4 arms. So it turns out that these guys, or the reason they're wearing long coats is because they've got one pair of arms outside and another pair of arms inside to do the shrinking,
I guess.
So I think that's why they've been genetically engineered or operated on, but they don't appear to be real people because I think we're supposed to think they're clones or something because they all look identical.
Yeah, and they're quite they seem to be artificially created in some form or fashion, although they never use the term clone. But
no, because we see them back on Delphos creating these guys and putting them into these big crates to get shipped back to Earth. So somehow they've got one of these guys, and this is where one of the women that's with them starts, "Oh, it's horrible," running away.
Yes.
And so they're all looking at this guy trying to figure out what's going on. And I think this is when Halstead starts to suspect that Nermi must be involved. It's like, who do I know who's a scientist who's experimenting with the human form? Well, there's this guy that I know who I'm also jealous of.
Yeah, I was about to say it does ring of motivated reasoning, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it must be him, but nobody will believe him. No one takes his accusation seriously because he's got no proof.
Get your love life in order, Halstead. My God.
Yeah,
that's a line that I wish was in the film.
Yeah, because he goes to the theatre at this point. I think this is when it is. I'm going off script here because this plot summary is very short, but I think might be where he goes to the theatre because he knows that that's where Nermi is going to be, and I think we see it twice in the movie, but this is the second.
This is the second time we're introduced to this bizarre butterfly theater action. Yeah,
and interestingly, one of the dancers in the butterfly dance is
oh, you mean Archie?
Yes. So yeah, it's Archie Savage, who we saw back in Assignment Outer Space. He is one of the dancers here,
and apparently he was the choreographer of this bit of strange modern dance as well.
So yeah, they're dancing. They call it a theatre, but it's more like there's a kind of raised section in the middle of the room, and then all the audience are standing around the outside just watching these 3 or 4 people dancing around like butterflies.
And to be honest, it would have been. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm assuming they're doing it this way because this is some kind of futuristic way of presenting, kind of theater in the round.
Yeah.
But if they had, if the people watching the dancing were less well lit than the people on the stage, I think it might have been an even more interesting looking sequence.
Yes. Well, that's it. Yeah, it doesn't really look like a theater. It's like they're all just standing around in a lobby.
Right.
Which might be where they filmed it. It looks like they've shot it in some kind of big lobby in a building somewhere and just stuck a quick stage in the middle. Because the lighting doesn't make it feel like a theatrical performance, which is a little bit odd. It reminded me of have you ever seen Moon 02?
Yes.
The Hammer film. There's some dance sequences in there as well, where there's a kind of nightclub on the moon, and it sort of reminded me a bit of the cabaret performances from that, which was fun. But the music in this one is a bit more, they're dancing to classical music rather than 60s sci-fi pop. But yeah, and it turns out that so Nermi is there at the show, and so Halstead follows him, and Nermi kind of legs it upstairs I think he's with the woman who was one of the people trying to kidnap Professor Freed, and the one who failed. So he takes her with him upstairs, and he goes into one of the dressing rooms of the theatre, and then he says, "You failed. I can't take imperfection." And he stabs her with something, and she just shrinks and disappears, and she's gone. Just as Halstead walks in, and Nermi is just casually picking up her clothes and hanging them on the rail next to with all the other clothes. And it's a bit weird. It's like, well, what is he doing in here anyway? Because I think they're followed by a bunch of these other guys, because then this is where Halstead is making his accusation, but there's no evidence. And Nermi's just killed this woman, or I don't know.
Or done away with her in some way.
Yeah. If she's one of his creations, he's just kind of dissolved her. There's weird space science going on here that we mortals don't understand.
The biomedical realities of this thing are beyond us all.
There's a fun moment when Halstead is looking, and he goes into the wrong dressing room, and there's all these women in their bras going, "Ah!" And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." That was very funny. As like a classic.
It's a classic thing of that type, and it's kind of bizarre that's stuck in there, but it does add to the sequence a little bit. I have to admit, it's kind of amusing.
So eventually, Halstead figures out that there's something going on, and it must be to do with Delphos, the planet that Nermi has talked about before. And he knows that Connie is in Delphos, so he's saying to Nermi, "What have you done with Connie? Where is she?"
Well, see, this is perfect for Halstead. He has found a way to combine personal and work life in a single thing.
Exactly, and it's perfect for us in the audience as well, that we get all these things nicely brought together.
Yes.
Because meanwhile, we have seen a little bit of what's happened to Connie on Delphos. She arrives there, and then she basically walks with this woman. She's like, "Oh, I'm here on holiday," but instead, she's brought through this area where they're building these weird four-armed guys,
Yeah.
and then she's taken into a room. She says, "Here's your room. Have a nice day," and then they just lock her in. She's basically just walked into her own prison, and then she's trapped in there. But then later on, we see them experimenting, or they're doing some kind of physical examination on her, and they're all like, "Oh yeah, she's perfect." And then what is it she's perfect for? Well, the camera pans across the room and then pushes in to a picture that's just lying there very casually to show us what they are planning for Connie. I don't know, Rod, would you like to try and explain what Connie's fate is to be?
Well, from the image that we're given, which is a face which is half Dr. Nurmi and half our beloved
Connie.
our beloved Connie Gomez. The idea seems to, if the first time you see this movie, you're like, what way are they going to like saw them in half and sew them together? Is that the whole point? Because that's what the image is telling me. But no, of course, it's stranger than that, and much more. And I'm going to use air quotes here, believable, because the concept is to take what they have deemed to be the perfect male specimen and the perfect female specimen, and to merge them together into one body. And of course, this is to be done as some sort of kind of bio merging.
Yeah. Now, do you think that they got this from the final program?
See, I don't know. I can't remember exactly when the final program was published. Now that I think about it, see, I got to thinking about that as well, because that is very much what Mrs. Brunner is up to in that first Jerry Cornelius novel from Michael Moorcock. But I can't remember exactly when the novel was published. And the thing is, as strange as this may sound, this is not exactly a concept that had not popped up in science fiction already. The concept of engineering the ultimate human, and it having to be, of course, because this is the most obvious thing that would occur if your brain goes down this particular side road.
Yeah.
Well, then it would have to be half human. It would have to be half male, half female, right? I mean, to be the ultimate human, it can't just be one gender or the other, because you can't function without the other. So it would have to be a single individual, and to me, it's interesting, because it is this idea that has popped up in science fiction in a blue bajillion different ways. Not as much anymore, because I think that the obvious drawbacks of it become more and more clear the more you think down that road. But the merging together the kind of single individual it's always an interesting kind of distortion or descendant from the whole idea of Frankenstein in the first place. The idea of creating life, or creating a version of life that that doesn't that the reproduction of life or the creation of life did not involve the actual act of sexual intercourse. It's not the normal formation of life. You're creating some new thing that is self-sufficient in and of itself, like the Frankenstein monster, and it becomes this. In other words, it goes that far back. The idea, not of course the merging of a male and a female, but I do find it fascinating. It's given much more of an apocalyptic, interesting variation by Michael Moorcock in the final program. But this is, like I say, the confusion here about, well, they're going to saw them in half. Are we going to have two different people, one left side male, right side male, depending on which one you're looking at? It's and plus there's that mystery of, okay, well, if you're merging two human bodies, let's just say that they're they both weigh 150 pounds. Well, then do you have a 300-pound creature? Is this what we're talking about? I mean, where does all that extra mass go? Or do you just slough the excess off to one side and create like a mini me? What is this?
Yeah, some bars of soap.
Some bars of soap. Oh, there's a Fight Club sequel. There you go.
Yeah. The what I thought was interesting, that image of the two of them kind of cut together. I'm pretty sure that reminded me of the poster for Glenn or Glenda.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Yeah,
one of those.
yeah.
You know, I swapped my sex. I changed my sex. There was a few of those sex change films in the 50s, and it kind of reminded me of some of the marketing for that. The sort of face split in half, and also years ago, I remember a friend of my dad's who had a beard. He shaved half of it off, right down the middle, so that he could go to a fancy dress party as a half man, half woman. And he had a beard on one half and makeup on the other half.
Nice.
And it was very confusing. So yeah, it looked quite a lot like this. That's pretty funny. So yeah, so Nermi he wants to create some kind of futuristic, perfect human race in this sort of typical mad science vein. But I don't know, he seems to be prepared to push himself forward for that quite early on.
Yes.
In his, I mean, he says he's been working on it for about 20 years or something, but you still think you'd want to run a few more tests first. But nope, he's ready to do a body merging with her straight away. He's got the equipment ready and everything. So so Halstead legs it to. Oh no, wait, there's a bit where he gets arrested. I can't remember why now. He's in trouble and he gets he gets confined to quarters.
Yes.
And so Franco Nero has to come and rescue him in their little red hovering spacecraft.
Yeah, Halstead makes it very clear that he is going to charge forward and go,
Yeah.
you know, and do what he thinks is best. And the powers that be, his superiors, decide that no, you can't do that, and so they put him under house arrest. And then he arranges to have Franco Nero and a couple of the other military guys bust him out.
Yeah, it's great. He leaps out of the window and jumps onto a rope ladder.
Rope ladder, yeah.
And he's hanging beneath this little red flying craft, and we just get all these shots of it still whizzing around. And I'm thinking, any second now, he's just going to smack against a building and he's dead.
Well, one of the things I love is that okay, we have those shots. I mean, and people, you know, some of the special effects in this movie work wonderfully. I mean, it's all the same kind of special effects that you remember. This film is made on a very tight budget. They didn't have a lot of money. These are what they could accomplish at the time, and so they're going for style over quality to a large degree. And but the shots of the little doll figure that is supposed to be Mike Halstead dangling from the rope ladder from the little miniature red spacecraft hanging over the city is amazing. And what kills me is that these are the same kinds of tricks that Margheriti would still be using to good effect all the way up into the 80s, because I'll never forget when I finally had the ability to still step through certain sequences of Yor, the Hunter from the Future, and discover that there are some shots where Yor is essentially a little doll.
Yeah, this bit reminded me of Pag doing his aerial acrobatic routine at the end of Yor, swinging across this big thing, and he's just like hanging upside down on a little rope.
Correct. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off there, but yeah, I was definitely thinking the same thing as you, I think.
I love it, but I can understand why it's an element of these films that easily can be sneered at, and is often, I would say most of the time, sneered at, because the special effects are not, quote unquote believable. They're part of what you're watching, and they're part of, you have to get into the spirit of the damn thing, or you're just, why are you bothering?
Yeah, and exactly. And let's not forget that Stanley Kubrick, on the back of these films, asked Margheriti for advice when he was doing 2001. So he was clearly impressed. And if it's good enough for Kubrick, it should be good enough for all of us. So yeah, anyway, so she is in trouble.
Yeah, she's in quite a lot of trouble. One of the funnier things when we were watching it the other night is that when she's, you talked about how they get to Delphus, and she's shown to her room and then locked inside it. And of course, she thinks she's going on a vacation. And the funny thing is that Beth just turned to me and she goes, "Well, the first thing I would ask is, hey, where's the swimming pool? I'm here on vacation." And I was like, and I looked at her and I said, "You don't remember this movie very well. You don't want to be anywhere near this swimming pool."
I know, yeah, because they've got this. He's got this big computer that's running the whole show, and the computer appears to be running on like basically liquefied bits of people, but not. He says they're not people. They're just the cast-offs from his experience, because he's growing female. He's growing just body parts in general, female or male. He's growing body parts, and then the stuff that gets rejected gets fed to the computer. So the computer appears to be running on this big lake. There's this red lake of liquefied, or I don't know, is it some kind of acid?
Well, it seems to me
dissolving
to be a form
body parts.
It seems to me that the idea is that it's just biomass that can be used for whatever he wants to use it for. In other words,
it's very good from an environmental point of view. That's quite good. He's not wasting anything.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's apparently useful for various and sundry things. I mean, I'm assuming this is what he's squirting into a giant mold to make his four-armed men, as well as the various women who accompany them. But the fact that you have to. I don't think that he can create the biomass from nothing, so that's where all the kidnapping comes into play.
Yeah, because he's kid. I'd forgotten. There's so many things going on in this film. It's quite easy to forget.
It's crammed with so much bizarre detail. There's so many different things going on all the damn time. I mean, we almost have to. Okay, let's acknowledge something right now, dear listener. It would be possible for us to do a full 20 minutes just delineating any 10-minute section of this movie and going through the details that are on screen and that are kind of being fed to us through the narrative. And it's not that it's some kind of super richly dense plot or some super convoluted or complex storyline. It's that they're really throwing everything they can into this movie, and in a way that it almost makes the other movies in the series pale by comparison, because it's almost as if they threw so many ideas into this movie that they were not able to like utilize some of those ideas in later movies, and so they kind of suffer a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough ideas in this film for all four of the films.
Yeah,
and stuff just. I mean, I love this movie, but it's so much that it doesn't make sense. So that we mentioned before about all the kidnappings, and they appear to be taking people back to Delphos. So that they can be part of these experiments into creating this master race, basically. And there's definitely strong overtones of fascism and these sort of Nazi ideas of the master race, which of course for Italians, we're only 20 years after the fall of fascism in Italy, so that's still quite fresh in a lot of people's minds, all of that stuff.
Yep.
But it seems to be that getting to Delphos from Earth is quite easy. Like, it doesn't take very long to get anywhere in this galaxy, but they're shrinking people, I think, just to make it easier to smuggle them out and get them back to Delphos. So the shrinking isn't part of the great scheme of things. It just seems to be a way to sneak people out in a suitcase, because when we get to Delphos, we see some of the people, including General Maitland, who is the big cheese that Commander Halstead has been looking for. He's there. He's back to normal size again, and so because Halstead races to Delphos, but then all of his men get caught and gassed, and
yes.
Nermi is gonna use them in his experiments, but he decides that they're all rejects. None of them are good enough for his experiments, but which again, not entirely sure what his criteria is, but he captures Halstead and decides, just like any good Bond villain, I'm going to give you a complete tour of my lair. Explain to you how
my diabolical plan.
Yeah, tell you the plan. Explain to you how all the technology works. Point out the very obvious, ventilation shafts in the Death Star, where you can just drop something in and blow the whole thing up. I'm going to make it really easy for you to beat me later on. Here goes. And then he just takes Halstead around and shows him everything, and this is where we get to see the digesting computer machine.
Yeah.
And it's pretty clear that all you've got to do is throw something at the computer and you can basically bring down the whole lot, because it's basically just made of glass tubes and light bulbs. So this is when Halstead finds out what's going on with Connie, and he manages to meet back up with Franco Nero, and we get to witness, this is the culmination, we're kind of going to spoil everything here, but this is the culmination where we're going to get to witness Nurmi merging himself in some partly undescribed way to Connie.
Yeah.
Connie is wheeled out in her underwear, and then she's on this sort of trolley, and then Nurmi has been gassed and he's asleep, and he's wheeled out on another trolley, and then they have this it's almost like a religious ceremony. This big glass covers for their trolleys comes down from the ceiling and is put over both of them, as we're going to start this merging process that we don't fully know how it's going to work. And meanwhile, Mike Halstead and Franco Nero and his other friends are all like, "Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And of course, what are we going to do to defeat the galaxy's leading science? Just start punching people in the face. And so
it's always worked before.
Yeah. So Mike and his guys just basically start a fight, and that stops the experiment from happening, and ultimately leads to something being thrown at the computer, which I think in an ironic twist, Nurmi throws something at Mike, but misses Mike and just smashes his own computer, and which of course causes a chain reaction. And in good James Bond villains headquarters style, the whole place ultimately gets flooded by this lake of human slurry.
Human slurry. It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And we just see all these scientists going and kind of dissolving in there, and Mike and his friends have to escape. Will they escape to survive to the next movie? I'll leave you on a slight cliffhanger with that, but basically yes. And there's a very in the book, Matt Blake points out the similarities between this and the Euro spy film, and it is basically a Euro spy film just set in space. But, obviously, like I mentioned, the whole Bond villain thing is just straight out of any Euro spy movie. But then also most Euro spy films end with your heroes next to a swimming pool, drinking cocktails in their little shorts, admiring the girls walking past in bikinis, and exactly the same thing happens here. Mm-hmm. So that is quite funny. And Franco Nero, what is he wearing? He's wearing this.
Okay, this cannot go unremarked. Franco Nero, who is at the point he made this movie, he's 1 year away from being an international star as Django. All right, so he's a year away from being an international sex symbol for the next, I don't know, forever. And in this scene next to the pool, is he dressed like Commander Halstead? Is he sitting there in a one-piece bikini showing off his physique? No, he is in what can be best described as a blue baby onesie that covers as much of his body as possible, and it is such an odd choice.
I really wish that this was available in HD, because it looks to me, I can't tell because what we're looking at on the Warner Archive, I should have mentioned earlier, this is available Warner Archive DVD, taken from what looks like a print in their collection rather than a decent negative. So it's hard to tell, but it looks to me like this thing he's wearing is hand knitted. It looks like one of those weird knitted jumpsuit, swimming suit things that were briefly popular in the 60s.
Maybe.
It's very odd. And he's quite a sight. I mean, he's a very good looking man, and he was only about 24, 25 at this point, because I know when they did Django, he was too young for the part, and they aged him up with makeup to make him look older than he was. So in this film, it's a bit of a shock, because you're like, hang on, he's the same age here as when he does Django, but he looks significantly younger in this film, to the point where you might not even recognize him at first.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's wearing an extraordinary swimming costume. I'm glad he's kept it dry, because I'm not sure how well it would stay together if he did jump in the pool.
I would love. I
But yeah,
would love to be able to. I'm of course that person who has all these bizarre questions for people who are still kicking, who made movies, decades ago. And I hate to say it. I know he would probably not be able to remember unless there's something that just stuck in his mind about it. But I swear to you, within 10 minutes of meeting Franco Nero and having the opportunity to ask him, I would be asking him about the damn blue onesie.
yeah. And he's like, "Oh yes, I've still got it on," and he whips his shirt open, and there it is. Now I have to confess, I have met Franco Nero,
Oh, did you ask him about the blue baby onesie?
but no, I forgot.
That's
a
see,
real shame.
opportunity missed, Adrian.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be, because he was the guest at the Cine Access kind of academic film festival several years ago. Him and Vanessa Redgrave, his wife. It is Vanessa Redgrave, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
they're married. So they were both there, and so as well as being a guest of the festival, because it was being organised by Brunel University, they gave him and Vanessa honorary doctorates,
Oh.
and so they had a full ceremony. Both him and Vanessa both gave speeches, and they were awarded these honorary doctorates. It was amazing, and I took pictures. They're on the I'll tweet these pictures out. They're on Cinema Retro's website. So he was quite busy that day, and he's wearing the full mortarboarding gown and everything. So I just managed to get my Blu-ray, the Blue Underground Blu-ray of Django, signed. So I didn't really get to talk to him or ask him any specific questions about these films, which I really wish I could have done. But yeah, it was pretty cool to actually get to meet him. And this is before he was in Django Unchained, and before he had this kind of revival again that he's experiencing in the last few years. But yeah, very cool to have been in the same room as Franco Nero.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, he seems like a very nice guy. But yeah, sadly, I didn't get to find out what he was wearing under his robes. and whether he still uses it. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, with some of these films are so cheap that they're wearing their own clothes.
Oh, who knows?
For the film. and so Margheriti just tells them all to just turn up in whatever they normally wear when they go to the pool. And he's like, "Really? You sure you want to wear that?" "Yeah, it'll be fine." Yeah.
Why not? Why not?
So yes, everybody, if you haven't seen Wild Wild Planet, get the DVD from Warner Archive. I mean, it's probably on YouTube. I haven't checked.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. Mainly
I don't know.
because
I would hope not, because it is. You should get the DVD if you can.
Oh well, one thing before we go, I've always when I dig into these movies, and of course I've dug into the Gamma One movies over and over again for I don't know 20 years. I mean, I used to own this stinking movie on Blu-ray. I mean, not on Blu-ray. Forgot. I wish I did own it on Blu-ray. I used to own it on Laserdisc. That's how far back I go with this. It's like,
wow,
what are you going to put it out on next, and I'll buy it essentially.
Yeah.
But the one of the things about the movie is you'll notice that the script writer, one of the people listed as a script writer for this, is a guy named Ivan Rayner.
Oh yes.
And there's been if you look at his IMDb credits, you'll notice that it's these films, and then he gets a producer credit on the kind of side Gamma One film produced in Japan in 1968 called The Green Slime. And there's really that's really about the extent of his list of credits. I mean, what you have is apparently an adaptation for a TV series in 1949 called The Clock. The 4 Gamma 1 films, and then a story credit on The Green Slime, and a producer on those films, and also a producer on The Terror Beneath the Sea from 1966, the Sonny Chiba film. And that's it, right?
Right.
Well, for years, people were curious as to whether or not Ivan Rayner was a real person, or if it was kind of a pseudonym that, one of those many things that can get caught in the IMDb trap of no one having enough knowledge of who these people were, who might have been hiding behind a pseudonym. But it turns out that several years ago, like almost 15 years ago, God, we're getting old, the mystery of who Ivan Rayner might be was finally solved when Tim Lucas was able to actually ask Sam Sherman, the producer, and distributor, I should say, who brought a lot of classic stuff over from Europe. Especially, he worked with Andy Milligan, and he did a lot of. He brought over he brought over the Mark of the Wolfman and turned it into Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, the first of Nashi's werewolf films back in the late '60s. But Sam Sherman knew who he was. He said the quote from Sam Sherman is, "I knew Ivan, and I can tell you a little about him. He was, in fact, a New Yorker who lived in New York City and was originally the program director for WOR-TV Channel 9 in Secaucus, New Jersey. He later worked with a film distributor by the name of Walter Manley, who had film distribution deals with companies all around the world, including the United States, Italy, and Japan." Turns out that that's who Ivan Rayner is. And so essentially you have these movies made in Italy, partially financed by MGM, written by a guy who worked in television in New Jersey.
Huh. That's so bizarre.
It's insane.
I mean, that must have come about through the fact that this had part funding from America then.
Yep. And the fact that, this was just, I'm sure someone said, "Hey, do we have anybody who has any ability to write science fiction plot lines? We need about I don't know, call it 4 scripts."
Yeah. I mean, it would be so good, and I don't want to be the person to do this, but it would be so good if somebody properly dug into this stuff and to the level of detail that Tim Lucas did for Mario Bava stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Interviewed almost everybody except the guy that Mario Bava bought his shoes from. But the level of research there was incredible. I don't think anybody will ever do that level of research again on anyone else, but it would be so good to know how some of this stuff came together. Now, there have been magazine articles about these films. Cinema Retro ran a feature on them a couple of years ago, and there's a magazine here in the UK called Starburst that had a feature on these films as well about a year or so ago, which was pretty good. But again, mostly those articles are just analysing the films themselves rather than digging into this stuff to that kind of degree. So there's a lot of detail that we'll never know. There is a book about Margheriti that does go through his films called Danse Macabre, but unfortunately it's entirely in Italian. I have it. I'm holding it in my hand now. It's by Fabio Giovanni, but I can't read it yet, so I don't know.
I'm desperate for someone to translate that into English.
It would be so good. I bought this from Luigi Cozzi in his shop in Italy, and he did tell me, he said, "Oh, but it's in Italian." I was like, "It's fine. I'm going to buy it anyway," just because it's the only book that there is specifically about Margheriti. But just flicking through it, again, it doesn't look that detailed in terms of research. It looks primarily like it's mainly just describing all the films. I don't think there's that much background information on all of them. So that level of research is yet to be done, which is a shame.
Yeah. And some of these people are still alive. I mean, these people are there and could be interviewed and talked to about this kind of stuff. Possibly information gleaned. I mean, it was 50/60 years ago, but hey, come on.
Yeah, well, that's it. But anyway, all we can do is point people towards the movies at this point, and also to what is available to read. Again, I do recommend Matt Blake's book Science Fiction Italian Style, which was my whole inspiration for starting this podcast in the first place. So do go and check that one out. I think we've thoroughly covered Wild Wild Planet today. I'm going to try and stick in some of the music in here as well. The soundtrack is quite fun. Not quite as experimental and sort of spacey as you might hope, but again, they were working very quickly into very low budgets, and they didn't have a lot of time to do the kind of extra stuff that you might hope for in a sci-fi movie. But they did a great job visually. It's just so fun. We talked about Planet of the Vampires last time, and what Bava pulled off on a low budget.
Yeah.
This is also being pulled off on a low budget, but in a very different direction.
Well, an even smaller budget.
Well, yeah.
Good Lord.
And he had a much smaller studios as well that had less facilities than Cinecittà. And this was at De Paola Studios in Rome, which were quite small compared to Cinecittà. So he's got less resources around him, and but he's doing things in a different way. I mean, whereas Bava was creating a kind of planet landscape with a few pools of bubbling water and some rocks and a smoke machine, here Margheriti builds a whole city, which is really cool to see. He also shoots. They have some scenes on Earth where it looks like they just went to some factory on the outskirts of Rome, and which doesn't really match at all visually with the rest of what we see of Earth, the sort of studio stuff that they do and the miniatures. So it jars a little bit, but it doesn't matter.
No, but I found it to be kind of effective because the kind of industrial look. Once you're once you're inside on the sets, it's like, okay, well that's it's what the outside of it looked like, and now we're in we're at an interior. It's
it kind of adds to the texture of the whole thing and but I suppose because most of what we're seeing are sets, very futuristic sort of Star Trek style sets. Whenever they're just outside on a street, on a road, in the countryside somewhere, or in this factory, it kind of takes you out of it a little bit, I think, because you've almost forgotten about what reality looks like because we're so used to all the artificiality of the rest of the movie. But anyway, it's fun. It's fine. It's really good fun. So I didn't want to do... Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say that, strangely enough, there have been some songs that have been inspired by this particular movie, and one of the most interesting is by a band called Several Mouth Parts.
Okay.
I know that's strange, but in 2018 they did a song called Wild Wild Planet, and there's no way to dispute that is what inspired this song. I mean, the lyrics are about the movie. So
okay, I'm going to have to see if I can look that up.
I would recommend it to everyone. The band is Several Mouth Parts. It's on the album Moonlight Drive. It is the last track, and it is once you see the movie, the song is pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Great. I'll drop a bit of it on here. Thanks for the tip. I had never even heard of that. So although because we're doing 10 space films in this season, so Wild Wild Planet is our representative from the Gamma 1 quadrilogy. So go and find all the other films are available. Two of the other movies are with the Warner Archive, and then one of them, I don't know why, for kind of rights and distribution reasons at the time, I guess, one of the 4 films fell to somebody else. So unfortunately that means we're never probably going to get a box set of all 4 films because of that one movie. I forget which one it is. I think it might be War Between the Planets that is with somebody else. But
yes, it's War Between the Planets that for some reason has been released on DVD by some other company. Yes. Yeah,
but they're all available. Do check out the whole bunch of them, and then, as you just mentioned before, you can go and watch its kind of companion film, unofficial companion film, which is of course The Green Slime, which has a lot of similarities to this film as well,
and is actually available on Blu-ray.
Yes, and that's a really fun one as well. Although that's Japanese, but is some people think of it as a film that's part of the Gamma 1 quadrilogy, but I think it's kind of connected, but it's not really part of the Gamma 1. But imagine that it's all in the same universe. Like if you were flying past Gamma 1 and then turn right at Jupiter, head a few more million miles, and you'll find the green slime.
Hang a left at Delphus,
yeah, and you'll find the green slime over there. Okay, thank you, Rod, for doing this again, and unfortunately in our next episode we're perhaps going to find less positive things to say about that film than we did about this one, but
probably,
hey,
yes.
It's all it swings and roundabouts with ups and downs with Italian genre movies. But hey, it's
the highs are very high, the lows are extraordinarily low.
Yeah. So that's a real tease for you all, everybody. Something to look forward to next time is a film that's not very good. But anyway, thank you all for listening. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. All the links are in the show notes for this episode, so I won't bore you with them here. Please tell your friends, give us a review, all the usual begging stuff that you hear at the end of every podcast. It does really help. Rod, thank you so much for doing this again, and I will talk to you again soon. And everybody, thank you for listening, and go away now and start calling everybody you meet a helium head, and let's see if we can get it to catch on.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Going to the wild, wild planet. Hop aboard, the controls are all dialed. Once you've been there, you'll never forget it. It's a world where all the women are wild. Watch out for those gadgets on their chests. They're deadly weapons, those things that you call breasts. I hope you're ready for the wild, wild planet. I trust you're up to being defiled. Afterwards, just never admit it. On a world where all the women are mild. Watch out for those gadgets they call ears. They'll trigger weapons, those things that you'd call tears. Let's go to the wild, wild planet. Let's go to the wild, wild planet. Wanna go to the wild, wild planet. Let's go to the wild, wild planet. Wanna go to the wild, wild planet.